Imagine this. You walk into a room, confident in your ideas, eager to help. You speak, expecting curiosity or even admiration. Instead, you're met with blank stares, tight smiles, and a silence that stings more than words. Ever had that moment where your intelligence, the very thing you thought would connect you to others, suddenly becomes the reason they push you away? It's a strange, almost cruel paradox. In theory, wisdom should be celebrated. In practice, it often makes you a target. In a world where comfort is often preferred over challenge, sharp minds can become social liabilities. This episode of Echoes of Wisdom explores a powerful, yet unsettling truth. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is pretend you're not. Not because you doubt yourself, but because you understand how people react to what they don't understand. Let's dive into this hidden dynamic, one that challenges our assumptions about intellect, self-expression, and the invisible cost of being truly perceptive. From our earliest years, we're conditioned to believe that intelligence is a virtue. Raise your hand in class, answer right, and you're praised. Solve the puzzle first. You're the hero of the moment. But step outside that structured environment, into the messy world of adults, and the rules change. Here, intelligence isn't always rewarded. Often, it's met with suspicion, or worse, resentment. The very qualities that got you gold stars as a kid now put you at odds with people whose self-worth feels threatened by your presence. Why does this happen? Because intellect, especially when displayed openly, can feel like a mirror, one that reflects back what others fear they lack. Not because you're arrogant, not because you mean harm, but because simply being sharp can unintentionally make others feel dull. Imagine someone at work who always seems to have the best ideas. They speak with clarity, solve problems quickly, and never seem flustered. Admirable, right, maybe, but now picture how that same person might be perceived by others on the team. The colleague who struggles, the manager who feels insecure. That same brilliance now feels threatening. And that's the rub. People don't just respond to what you say, they respond to how you make them feel about themselves. And if your intelligence highlights their insecurities, even unintentionally, their reaction might not be gratitude. It might be quiet hostility. Not open conflict, but a distancing, a slow, creeping resistance. You're left wondering, what did I do wrong? You were just being yourself. That's the tragedy of high intelligence in an emotionally fragile world. You think you're helping, but they think you're showing off. Let's bring this down to the playground. Picture a gifted child in a regular classroom. She finishes her work before everyone else. She reads at a higher level. When the teacher asks a question, she always knows the answer. At first it's impressive, then it's annoying. Other kids start whispering, she thinks she's so smart. Teachers, consciously or not, start giving more attention to the students who struggle. And that child, she learns a harsh lesson. To fit in, she might need to hide what makes her different. She starts pretending not to know, laughs along with the wrong answers, deliberately leaves a few problems blank. Not because she wants to fail, but because she's tired of being left out. Her intelligence didn't elevate her, it isolated her. And that dynamic doesn't stop at childhood. In adult life, the game just gets more complicated. The boardroom, the dinner table, even social media, all become stages where intellect must be carefully managed. Too little, and you're dismissed. Too much, and you're resented. So what do? You play dumb. Not because you are dumb, but because you recognize that blending in can sometimes be smarter than standing out. You make yourself approachable, relatable, even a little bit fallible. You ask questions you already know the answers to. You laugh at jokes that don't make sense. You let others explain things you understand better than they do. And in doing so, something interesting happens. People open up. They feel safe around you. Their defenses drop. They don't see you as a competitor. They see you as a friend. That's when the real magic begins. You see, being underestimated has its perks. When people don't see you coming, you can move freely, observe more. Influence quietly, navigate the room without attracting resistance, because no one fights a ghost. You're not dimming your light. You're using a dimmer switch. There's a long tradition of this in human history. The idea of the wise fool appears in ancient texts, folk tales, and royal courts. The jester who uses humor to speak truths the king can't punish. The warrior who feigns weakness to draw out the enemy. The friend who pretends to be clueless, only to steer the conversation toward a deeper truth. Playing dumb isn't deception. It's discretion. A strategic pause in a world where ego reacts faster than understanding. Think about the most influential people you've known, not necessarily the loudest or the most credentialed, but the ones who could guide a group without ever seeming pushy, the ones who knew things but never had to prove it. That's real power, quiet, subtle, and rooted in self-confidence, because when you truly know your value, you don't need to announce it. You're not performing for validation. You're operating from within. Calm, composed, and utterly free from the exhausting need to prove yourself. Let's be honest. Modern culture doesn't always reward subtlety. We live in a time of instant opinions, performative knowledge, and digital applause. Speak plainly, and you're ignored. Speak wisely, and you're often misunderstood. It's no surprise, then, that many thinkers and creators learn to water down their message just to be heard. They use humor, relatability, and self-deprecation not because they lack depth, but because they know depth scares people away. Playing dumb becomes a way to survive the noise and reach the people who are actually listening. Now, this isn't about abandoning your values or pretending to be someone you're not. It's about choosing your moments, understanding the landscape, being wise enough to know when to speak and when to hold your tongue, when to teach and when to simply observe, when to shine, and when to let others shine instead. In social settings, this might mean allowing your friend to take credit for an idea you sparked. In professional life, it might mean presenting your insight in a way that elevates the team, not just yourself. In relationships, it might mean letting a partner express their thoughts without immediately correcting them. These aren't signs of weakness, they're signs of strength, emotional intelligence, strategic empathy, and they go a long way. There's something peaceful about not having to fight every battle, about knowing your brilliance doesn't need to be on full display to exist. There's no scoreboard, no jury, no need for applause. In fact, some of your greatest victories may come from silence, from walking away from the argument you know you'd win, from letting the insecure colleague feel smart, from making others feel seen, not outshone. Over time you build trust, you gain allies, and when the moment does call for your insight, it will hit with 10 times the force, precisely because you weren't constantly wielding it. That's the power of restraint. Let's bring this home. If you've ever felt like you had to shrink yourself to fit into a room, you're not alone. If you've ever been called too much, too intense, or too deep, you're not imagining it. And if you've ever chosen silence not out of fear but out of wisdom, then you already understand the art of playing dumb. It's not selling out. It's knowing your audience. It's protecting your peace. It's ensuring that your message, your influence, and your spirit aren't rejected before they're even understood. It's strength, camouflaged as softness. So here's your quiet challenge for the week. Pick one interaction, just one, where you'd usually correct someone, prove your point, or showcase what you know, and instead, don't listen, nod, ask a question, even if you already know the answer. Observe the shift. Watch how people relax around you, how they open up, how they draw closer instead of pulling away. You'll see that the art of playing dumb isn't really about hiding who you are. It's about when and how you choose to reveal it. It's about timing, presence, mastery, and it might just be the smartest move you ever make. There's a quiet elegance in not needing to be right. Not because you doubt your intelligence, but because you've outgrown the ego that craves recognition. This is where real wisdom begins, not in accumulation of facts or rapid-fire comebacks, but in the restraint not to use them as weapons, because intelligence without emotional maturity can be sharp, even dangerous. It slices through conversation like a knife, leaving people wounded where you meant to only make a point. But when intellect is guided by awareness, by humility, by timing, it doesn't divide, it connects. There's an art to subtlety, a kind of strength in softness that's rarely understood until it's experienced. It's in the person who lets the room underestimate them, until they speak and everything changes. It's in the one who listens more than they talk, not because they have nothing to say, but because they're gauging everything. The wisest people in the room often say the least, not because they're disengaged, but because they're watching. They're observing patterns, dynamics, vulnerabilities, motives. They're playing the long game in a world addicted to short-term noise. And when they do speak, people lean in, because silence has made their words rare, and rarity creates value. Let's explore a deeper layer now, the psychology behind why intelligence is often met with discomfort. When someone encounters a person who speaks clearly, reasons quickly, or notices what others miss, it challenges their internal narrative. Most people believe they are competent, thoughtful, and aware, but an encounter with someone markedly sharper can feel like an existential threat. It shakes the illusion. It says, without saying, there's more you don't know. And that message, though unspoken, can trigger insecurity, defensiveness, or even quiet hostility, especially in environments where people tie their self-worth to being right or being seen as competent. In such spaces, the presence of a truly intelligent person becomes uncomfortable, not because that person is doing anything wrong, but because they represent a contrast, and contrast often breeds comparison. And comparison, that breeds resentment. This is the emotional tax of insight, of seeing clearly, of knowing deeply. You may think your brilliance will be welcomed, but what you offer may only be truly valued by those who are secure in themselves. Everyone else may smile on the surface, while silently wishing you'd dim down. This is why many intelligent people learn to code, switch, not just across languages or cultures, but across social layers of awareness. They develop the skill of reading the room, adapting their tone, softening their insight, packaging deep truth inside familiar language. They learn when to ask questions instead of giving answers, when to step back so others feel they've arrived at the idea themselves. They become conductors of insight, not just producers of it. This is not manipulation, it's social intelligence, the understanding that raw brilliance, delivered without calibration, often falls on deaf ears or provokes resistance. Because people aren't just logical, they're emotional. They don't just hear your words, they feel what your presence implies. And if your presence implies that they're less aware, less capable, or less valuable, even unintentionally, you will trigger their defenses, and so the wise learn to guide without dominating, to influence without overwhelming, to uplift without condescending. It's not about hiding your power. It's about directing it in a way that doesn't activate fear. This brings us to the difference between being right and being effective. Being right satisfies the ego. Being effective serves the moment. Sometimes, the most strategic move isn't to prove your point, it's to plant a seed. To offer just enough of an idea that it takes root in someone else's mind. Not by force, not through debate, but through curiosity. The goal isn't to win arguments, it's to open pathways. That means you'll sometimes let others speak first, even when you know where the conversation is headed. You'll allow room for people to arrive at truth in their own time. You'll be patient with ignorance, not because you tolerate foolishness, but because you recognize the pain behind it. And yes, you'll occasionally pretend not to know, so that someone else can shine. You'll ask questions you already know the answers to, because doing so builds connection. And you'll let others teach you things you've mastered, because their need to feel useful matters more than your need to display what you know. This is how wise people move, not out of weakness, but out of deep, strategic compassion. You may find that once you embrace this approach, your life starts to flow differently. Conversations become smoother, conflicts lessen, people begin to trust you, not because you're always dazzling them, but because they feel safe around you. And safety is a powerful currency. People follow those who make them feel understood, not those who make them feel inferior. You'll also notice how much easier it becomes to influence outcomes. When you're not triggering egos, people lower their guard. They become receptive. You no longer have to push ideas. You guide them. You no longer have to fight for space. You're invited into it. This is the paradox. The less you assert your intelligence, the more powerfully it operates. Your presence alone becomes persuasive because people sense depth, even when it's unspoken. They feel steadiness, even when you say little. And in a world of performance, that quiet authenticity is magnetic. Let's explore the philosophical core behind this entire way of being. It echoes ancient Stoic wisdom: know yourself, control yourself, serve the moment. It's not about denying who you are, it's about mastering who you are. Channeling your gifts with precision, not flamboyance. Eastern philosophies speak of wu-wei, the art of non-action or effortless action. It's the way of flowing with life, not struggling against it. The wise fool, the silent monk, the unassuming elder, these archetypes exist in nearly every culture, because history teaches us what culture often forgets: that power doesn't need to announce itself. It simply is. The sharpest swords stay sheathed, the strongest minds speak softly, the most insightful hearts listen more than they speak. They don't diminish themselves, they regulate their signal. They know that true impact requires more than just truth. It requires timing, tone, trust. There's also freedom in this. When you no longer feel the need to impress others, you begin to impress yourself. When you stop seeking recognition, you start recognizing your own peace. You realize that most people's approval is built on fleeting things: status, trends, surface impressions. But your mind, your vision, your clarity, that's yours, and it doesn't need a stage to be real. In fact, once you stop chasing attention, you begin attracting respect, quietly, steadily, from those who see what others miss, because the real ones feel your depth, even when you don't flaunt it. Now, let's acknowledge something important. This way of being isn't always easy. It can feel lonely. When you choose wisdom over performance, restraint over ego, you may walk a quieter path. You may have fewer viral moments, fewer applause breaks, fewer people clapping for your insight. But what you gain is deeper. You gain sovereignty, the ability to move through any room, any relationship, any challenge, without losing yourself. You gain clarity. The ability to see beyond emotion, beyond drama, into the mechanics of what's really going on. You become the calm in the storm, the signal in the noise, the one others look to when things fall apart. Not because you shout, but because you've shown you don't need to. In the end, this isn't about being clever. It's about being conscious, about knowing the emotional terrain of others, and choosing how you navigate it, about choosing connection over control, presence over posturing, stillness over struggle. The irony is that playing dumb in the right context is actually the highest expression of intelligence, because it means you've outgrown the need to prove you're smart. You're not playing small, you're playing deep. So here's what you carry forward from this. You don't have to show everything you know. You don't have to correct every mistake. You don't have to outshine anyone to shine. Let others feel big in your presence. It costs you nothing and gives them everything. Let others teach you even when you know. Let others win the small games, because you're playing for something far bigger. You're playing for peace, for perspective, for presence, and that's rare. That's real. That's you operating at a level most will never understand, and that's okay. If this message touched a part of you that often feels unseen, unheard, or uncelebrated, know this: you're not alone. There is strength in your silence, strategy in your softness, mastery in your patience, and somewhere, someone is watching you, learning from you, feeling safer because of you, not because you demanded attention, but because you radiated presence. Keep going, stay wise, and never forget, the world needs more quiet minds with loud hearts.